Hello, fellow classmates and professor. My name is Alex Carson. I'm going to be discussing my paper on pilot fatigue and aviation accidents. A little background on myself. I am an airline pilot. I worked for several different airlines over the last 10 years in various types of flying, from smaller single-engine airplanes flying cargo all the way up to large 70-passenger jets flying all over the United States. So I have a little bit of an experience with the way airlines operate and the type of fatigue that can occur for pilots. Just to begin with my paper, with the background, what exactly is fatigue? We all know what that is. It's any time we have a mental or physical um, our mental or physical abilities are diminished due to lack of sleep, or even something as simple as physical exertion. We've all been fatigued from working too hard, something to that effect. The problem is when a pilot is fatigued. Um, Typically, the types of situations pilots are in are typically very low demand periods for long periods of time, followed by very high demand periods, and that fatigue can cause complacency in the low demand periods, as well as an inability to function in a situation such as landing, a difficult approach, or something like that that requires a lot of concentration. You won't have the mental capacity to handle that situation, and there are many documented cases. We'll talk about a few that have contributed to the accidents that have occurred throughout the years. A quick background on pilots and the different types of airlines. There are basically three different sets of rules that pilots operate under, depending on the type of flying and what type of airline they work for. Um, uh, what's known as Part 91. It's Part 91 of the Federal Code of Regulations that governs aviation. That Part 91 governs basically all general aviation. So any small light planes you see flying around that are guys out having fun or something like that, or um, airplanes that are operated that are owned by somebody. If you own your own Learjet and have somebody fly it for you, that plane is going to operate under the Part 91 regulations. The Part 91 rules are pretty lax as far as crew rest and pilot duty and things like that. It basically requires no rest for the pilots required at all. You could fly 24 hours a day if you wanted to. Another set of rules that we operate under is Part 135, which is what you'd see charter operations, cargo operations, and smaller airplanes operating under. And those rules are fairly lax. It's a long series of regulations, but essentially the pilots need basically 10 hours free from duty, and that's pretty much the only regulation there. Part 121, which is what all major U.S. carriers operate under, is the most restrictive, and depending on the types of flying that you're doing, can require as much as 25 to 30 hours of rest, depending on how long you've flown, things like that. As far as the accidents that have been attributed to fatigue or had fatigue listed as a contributing factor, it's important to note that the FAA has never actually said that fatigue was the cause of an accident. It's always been listed as a contributing factor. The closest they've ever really come to it was the Colgan accident in February of 2009 that everybody's probably familiar with, which was the accident in Buffalo, New York, where the airplane stalled and subsequently crashed, killing everybody on board and one person on the ground. The pilots had been awake off and on, not necessarily actually on duty with the airline, but awake, commuting across the country. And the reaction to the aircraft's entry into the stall was an incorrect reaction. That incorrect control input is what caused the airplane to enter a deeper stall and crash. So the actual cause of the accident was the inappropriate control action, but a contributing factor to that, and a major one, was the fatigue. Everybody is probably somewhat familiar with what followed that accident, where the families involved in that accident petitioned Congress and pretty heavily lobbied Congress to pass new rules, which were passed to um, change the flight time and duty time requirements for airlines. It's actually had a pretty sweeping change in the industry. I no longer fly for a carrier, a 121 carrier that's affected by it, but at the time, and my friends who still do, it's going to have pretty big implications both for the staffing models of the airlines because they'll need more pilots, as well as the career potential for the pilots that are out there. Now, the pay will not be as good because pay is based on the flight time that we get. It's door closed, the door open, basically, on the aircraft. And if you can't fly as much, you won't make as much money, is what it comes down to. So there's some fiscal issues that have to be brought into this as well. Um, the basic findings in my research paper um, basically show that yes, these rules do need to change based on more scientific things such as the circadian rhythms and the sleep wake cycles for the crew members involved. If you get up every day at 4 a.m., you become used to that. You go to sleep at 8 o'clock at night so you can get 8 hours of sleep. Well, for pilots working a normal schedule at an airline, you may get up at 4 a.m. the first day. The next day, you need to be at work at 9 a.m. The next day, you need to be at work at 11 a.m. And the last day, you may have to show up at work at 3 p.m. and work until 1 a.m. in the morning, which is a significant shift. And essentially, the studies that I've included in the paper um, have said that there's no good way to deal with that. A lot of consideration has been given to things like Ambien, melatonin, and for things like that, number one, Ambien and other drugs are not really permissible for use by flight crew members by the FAA. And secondly, one of the studies here's a quote from one of the studies that I have in my paper is theoretically it might be useful for long haul aircrew to phase advance the circadian cycle after eastward flights and to phase delay the cycle after westward flights. In practice, however, it is anticipated that the effects of melatonin will be minimal or absent. So essentially, through the studies that I found, it has little to no impact on the crew members. The only thing that will fix this is rest, having more time free from duty, less time actually at work, and a more synchronization of the schedules that allow people to stay on a more regulated schedule so that their bodies can function at a normal circadian rhythm rather than jumping all over the place. So there's a lot of changes that need to be made still, even with the passage of the new rules. But the new rules were a fantastic step towards helping create another barrier to safety for the flying public and to protect them. I'd like to thank you all for listening to my report, and hope everyone does well in theirs. Thank you.